Welcome to another episode of the Spotters Podcast. If you were listening to the last episode, we were talking more about editing techniques. We were going to touch base a little bit of color grading, but we ran out of time. So here you get another video episode of kind of basic color grading and how a few tweaks, small or large, can really change your images. All right, we're going to start with the little segment I like to use called lens cleaning, where I'm going to correct an error that I may have said in the previous episode. When I was talking about red flag, I actually attended red flag 23-1, which took place in 2023. You might have heard it as 2003 or 2004. I did edit these photos probably a few days after that trip, but the majority of them got edited about a year later in 2024. So here I have a few more photos from the trip. These have been edited already, but we're going to change how it was originally to something different. And we're going to use the same kind of format from Red Flag. We have 4 different aircraft. We have an F-35, we have an AWACS, F-22 on the Ridgeline, and we got some MH-60s. Let's go into this develop mode. And let's talk a little bit about profiles, right? So camera profiles determine the contrast and color interpretation of the photo. Every manufacturer has different names. If you're using Canon, you probably recognize picture style, and that's going to be standard, landscape, portrait, neutral, flat. It's going to be different names. And every manufacturer is going to use kind of the same profile names. For Nikon, it's going to be picture control. And when I had searched my menu, I saw standard, neutral, vivid, monochrome for black and white, portrait, landscape, and flat. And I use standard for the most part. For Sony's, the setting is creative style, and I'm not sure what exact profiles those are, but it should have probably the same names or other variations of names. Before Lightroom Classic on Creative Cloud, which we're using tonight, it was located in the calibration panel rather than the top here under profile, right? So right now, let's go to, I guess we're going to do these MH60s and edit this. This profile is showing it as a matrix, and it's kind of just selecting based on what Adobe thinks my camera wants. And if you can hit this little drop down arrow, you can select Adobe Color. It's going to determine Adobe presets, right? Adobe Vivid, Adobe Monochrome, all these different presets. You can set them up yourself. If you want to expand on those profiles, you click these 4 windows and it'll take you to Adobe Raw. And once again, it's Adobe is determining what your color profile is going to be, right? I don't normally mess with Adobe Raw too much. The camera matching will show exactly what these camera profiles were in camera if you had set these up. And once again, you could change it when you get into editing. Monochrome, there's different monochromes in here. You got vivid, portrait, all that stuff. There's an artistic. It's going to have more of the purples and the blues. And what I like to do is go down into the modern range. And even though I kind of have a plan already, I want to make this kind of like a film feel image. I can go into vintage and then try to find a film feel, but we're going to do it this way, right? We're going to go into the modern. We're going to select like modern, let's see, modern 8, modern 6. I'm kind of torn. I want it kind of bright, but I want to show these, I want to pop this contrast in my mind. Let's do modern 8, and then we'll kind of work with this kind of bright image, right? So we're going to change that profile. The next thing I'm going to do is select my white balance. Now the white balance is going to be kind of hard because there's not really much grays in here besides the aircraft. There's actually quite a few grays in there. We're going to select a gray that I think is pretty close to what the neutral color would be. And it kind of brings out a little bit more reds and oranges in the mountainside. And white balance in camera, you could set it. You could set up a Kelvin if you want to really get into it, and an actual temperature of what that light is going to be. I normally set my camera to auto. That way I have more flexibility when I'm editing in Lightroom, and try to figure out what the actual white balance is. So here it's a custom based on that gray of that helicopter. Now we could change it. We could go to auto here and see how that looks. Kind of washed out the mountainside a bit. We're gonna go back to custom. We're gonna mess with this a little bit. All right. We're gonna go into the mask. It's gonna be this circular little button here with a dashed outline. And in that mask, we could select either the subject and let Adobe try to figure out what the subject is. If we want to just select the sky, it will just select this sky without the mountain. But we're going to select everything. We're going to select the whole background, and hopefully it will just not select the helicopters. All right, that worked pretty well. There is some spaces here that is kind of missed out, but it's really tight. I'm not going to mess with it too much. And here we're going to change the color temperatures, also change the tones, your contrast. Let's pop that contrast a little higher. Let's reduce these highlights, right? We're going to make this color temperature a little on the blue side. And I still want to pop this mountainside, so we can scroll all the way down to right below the curve in the effects window and increase that dehaze. And that's pretty dramatic right there. And it's kind of like how I wanted it to look, have that film feel. But as you see, as we increase this dehaze, it's a dramatic change. It really pops the contrast in the mountains. It puts an automatic gradient in the sky, kind of how it actually looked. But it's showing up. You're seeing a lot of stuff. There's some grain up here. There's some dust spots that my camera is pretty dirty that trip. So I didn't get it cleaned. Now I can adjust that. I'm gonna do that real quick and adjust, clean up these dust spots. So let me go zoom in. Just go ahead and clean these up. And as you see, there's already a few spots already cleaned up. So bringing that dehaze in there really showed that I did not get everything. This one, I'm not really particular in where it's selecting from. I'm just trying to clean this up as best as I can, just for this little demo. All right, let's do that. All right, so this is pretty good so far. I probably want to get a little tighter in this crop. Here, we could change the aspect ratio. Kind of want to make it look like a film scene here, right? So we're gonna zoom in a little bit and kind of center on those two. It's not really paying attention to any of the rules. So you want to have rule of thirds. You would kind of line up a helicopter within the cross marks here. I'm kind of not abiding by the rules of photography. I'm just kind of doing something willy-nilly. All right. So after you're done with your mask, you want to go down to your tone curve. And here, as you see, I've already kind of messed around with it. This top section here is going to be for your highlights. Your middle section is your lights and darks right at the edge. As you go higher on the tone curve, you're going to go into your brights and highlights and lights. And as you go lower on the tone curve, you're going to go into your shadows and your darks, right? So I like to set pretty much the point. This tool right here, this S curve, you could pretty much drag it and it'll figure out what it's supposed to be. It'll adjust it automatically on Adobe. I don't normally like to do it that way. Sometimes it kind of pulls it too much. So I'll go into the points here. So in this points, I'm going to change these highlights, maybe pull down the highlights a little bit, get these darks and these shadows and drop it, and then really drop the shadows a little bit more so I can get some more contrast on that mountainside. And that's all I'm going to do for the tone curve. Next module down below is the color mixer. And this is going to pretty much adjust your hue, saturation, and luminance. And as you see, I've already kind of dropped the blues on that saturation. And here you can increase it if you want. It's going to increase that gradient a bit. Let's go ahead and do that. We'll increase that gradient. And then in the hue, we're going to change that color tone and make it a little bit more teal. And it's kind of trendy having a teal gradient on there. It makes it look a little on the modern side, but that's fine. We could do that. We want to also increase the saturation on these rocks. We want to enhance these earth tones, get some more orange in there, a little bit of the red, maybe drop down some yellows. I want to make that desert kind of pop. And it also in the hue, you could also change. So the hue is going to change the actual color you're messing with. On red, it's going to bring it into more of the reds. And sometimes it'll grab the reds out of the sky or out of an aircraft. If you bring it up higher, it's going to bring up the highlights on that hue. So we're going to keep that kind of mid range. And the same thing for luminance. Luminance actually increases the brightness or the shadows of it, so we can increase the red. I mean, you're not really seeing it move that much. If you're looking at the earth there on the mountains, you can see how dropping the luminance on the red is changing the tops, and you're losing some color in there, but you're getting some more of those shadows. So we'll kind of leave it right there. Same for the oranges. And this is all personal preference. You could change whatever you want here. You could make these mountains green, by changing the saturation and luminance. So after that, we're going to go into split toning. Actually, it's called color grading now. It was split toning in the older Lightrooms, and that came from Lightroom 4 before I upgraded to Creative Cloud last year. So from Lightroom 4 to, I think this is like Lightroom 11 or Lightroom 10, it's a huge jump. This is actually decreasing the amount of editing time that I normally go and had to edit before. It was like hours. Now I could get something edited to exactly how my standards are in probably like 15, 20 minutes. So here, I kind of like how this is looking so far, but just for an example, we're going to change the shadows and highlights, or even we're just going to change the midtones, right? So this wheel, you're going to have two nubs. So you got one in the middle, and then you got one on the outer circle. So let's get it orange, and then now let's change the intensity. The intensity is adjusted by dragging the nub away from the center. So there's no intensity when it's in the dead center there. And when you bring out the nub or the little dial, you can see how the intensity increases, and it's actually changing the picture dramatically. And this is just affecting the midtones, right? It's making it wild. Now we're going into the purples, and it's changing the purples across the whole image. It's not just the highlights or the shadows, right? If you feel like you've gone a little bit too far on it, you could either go back into your history and remove that midtone, or you could right or double click. I mean, I'm using a Mac, so I'm like right clicking or double clicking and reset those midtones, and it'll go back to exactly how you had it set. So let's see, highlights, we're going to let's increase these blues a little bit. So the highlights is pretty much detecting the sky. I want to increase the blues in there. And the shadows is going to probably be down here in the mountainside, right? Let's kind of reverse that look a little bit. And it kind of looks like a mountain scene, a little desert scene. It's nothing so dramatic. It's not that big of an edit. On Mac, again, if you hit on the keyboard, the backspace, you can see the original, and it's still pretty dramatic from the original photo. This is straight raw right out of the camera, and no corrections on it. And here is after those edits. So just adjusting the color, not really adjusting much else. Along with the profile, we haven't adjusted the sharpening on it, the masking on that. There's no denoise on it. There's still a little bit of grain up here, but that's a pretty good starting point if you want to just have a quick edit. If you want to get more detailed and more creative, you can always smooth it out. Use that denoise to smooth out that grain. You can increase the sharpening here, and I mean, we could do, so if I do Alt on the masking, it shows this whole picture, and it's actually not, it's showing all the grain that's in that photo, right? As you increase that masking, it's now only selecting, it's not selecting that grain anymore. So I'm selecting the helicopters and the mountainside, right? If I increase it even further, then you're selecting less of the mountains, and more of the aircraft. When you go in here, you're going to see a little bit more. I mean, this is pretty far image, so it wasn't that sharp to begin with, but in just adjusting the masking, it did sharpen these helicopters. If we go back before I sharpened it, you can see it kind of gets a little soft there, but really not that bad when you do it. So that's pretty much this image. I think I'm going to keep it just like this, right? So that's one way of making an image, a flat image, into a cooler image, like a color temperature, cool image, right? There's a few other things. So let's go into this this tower shot with the AWACS departing, right? Now, when you go to red flag, if you ever go out there, and please do, because you see some really awesome aircraft, whatever you do not stand at the fence. You don't want to stand anywhere near the airport property, right? Um, People do it, and I don't know what the reason is. You're not really going to get any closer to the aircraft. You want to be safe. You want to kind of have a good example for photography spotters out there. And most part, we don't want to have our day ruined by security forces coming out and telling us to leave because we're too close to the airfield, right? So we want to make sure you shoot from a safe distance. You don't take any pictures of like ground crews or buildings or, all those things that security forces doesn't want you looking at in the first place. Now, mind you, you could probably get a better view from Google Earth or Google Maps, but you don't want to have an argument with security forces either. So I digress. This photo was captured from across the street. I made sure to be above the fence line, above the buildings. I don't want to see anything. My focus there is this aircraft, right? And this is a pretty far image. I was shooting with a Tamron 100 to 400 millimeter, and this aircraft is still really far from where I was at. And you can see you got some heat haze there. It's not a perfect image, but I really want to make this desert scene pop. I want to feel that desert heat that it was out there in February. And it was a little chilly, but I want to feel that desert heat. So we're going to change this one. We're going to plan on making this like a warmer edit. Let's go ahead and set our profile. So let's go up. We're going to make this a vivid, right? Increase that contrast a bit. We're going to change now the white balance. All right, it's a little bit better. All right, let's go into this crop, because this is pretty wide. I don't want to be that wide on it. I kind of want to have a single image on Instagram and just kind of make this an 8x10, crop it out. Still getting some of that mountainside in the background, but using that rule of thirds, right? You don't want to I'm going to get it, kind of have those leading lines. Like, we're going to focus on this tower, and the tower is looking at this aircraft departing. I think that's pretty cool right there as a kind of an easy crop. All right. We're going to go into the mask. We're going to select the background because I want to select everything except for this aircraft. And hopefully it will select everything. There is some spaces in here. And I know if I edit the background, these are going to look strange. So let's just go ahead and correct these spots, right? So in this window for your mask, you can select the plus sign to fix the brush. I'm just going to select this brush tool, and you can either make it as big as you want or as little as you want. Right, and we're going to try to make this as neat as possible, but still, we don't want to have to spend hours brushing out all these background spots. So we're going to kind of go in here, do a kind of quick, kind of rough, not really pretty masking of it, just to kind of, as an example, just kind of get rid of it. And then we might get some clipping on the highlights here on the pedestal, but it's in the shadow, so I don't think it's gonna affect so much. Let's go back to 100%. So in this mask, we're going to change a few things. We're going to make it a little on the orange, hotter side, right? Bring out that heat. Now you can see it's kind of changing. Let's increase that contrast. It changes that foreground a little bit. Let's drop these highlights. Now you can see it's getting kind of warm, right? If you really want to pop it, you could kind of go down to the effects once again and increase that dehaze, and it kind of changes it too much, and it gets kind of weird and funky with that, selecting the exhaust, and the sky is now a different color. It's a little strange. So, right, so now let's do dehaze at about 12. Let's kind of go back up to this color, because now that yellow is a little too much. Let's kind of drop it down a little bit. All right, so we're going to increase the blacks on that a little bit, drop these whites, kind of make that desert feel, right? So we're going to keep it with that for now on the mask. They're going to go down to tone curve. And, I did copy these settings from the previous photo, so We're just going to adjust this a little bit. I kind of losing a lot of highlights. So let's bring up the highlights a bit. Let's bring up the shadows a little bit more. Okay. I think that's pretty good. We're still got a lot more to tweak in this photo. We're going to go down to the hue, saturation, and luminance. And here in the saturation, we're going to increase the orange, decrease the yellow because that was kind of strange. I didn't want that much yellow in it. And then change the hue. And don't worry if it's not dramatic now, it's gonna get that way. All right, we want to drop these blues a little bit. Saturations. Right here, I see some blues in the background in the shadows of this aircraft. And I don't want so many blues. I want that white to kind of pop of that aircraft. So I'm going to drop these blues in the saturation, which is going to reduce the blues here and make this white again. And if you want to see the difference, you increase these blues and you'll see how that shadow makes that aircraft blue. And we know this aircraft is white just by spotting it a few times, right? So let's drop that there. All right, so that's pretty decent for color mix. We're not going to mess around with it too much. What we really want to get into is color grading. And this is where the color is really going to pop when you start using this. Color grading pretty much changes the midtones, shadows, and highlights, balances out the highlights and the shadows, and you can blend the two together if you're doing gradients and whatnot. And let's work with highlights now. And this is the great thing about these creative edits, that you could kind of do whatever you want. So in this, we're going to make this really kind of orange feel. Now it's looking more like a desert. So let me explain these two little nubs here. We're looking at this highlight circle, right? This knob that was in the middle is pretty much the intensity of that color that you're selecting the hue. The hue color is on the outside of the circle. And as you move that around, you change the color of your highlights. The nub that is in the center of the circle is your intensity and is adjusted by dragging it away from the center. So here the intensity for this yellow is in the 52 range. Midtones, we could do that. We could mess it around. Here we're going to make it as intense. These midtones looks like it's affecting the mountainside for the most part. So we can make it green. We can make it blue. Kind of want to make it more the orange side and kind of blend it in, but it's not really looking as great as I thought. So let's go ahead and back that down a little bit. There's a little bit of blues in the midtones right back here. And you know what? You still see it's kind of like a haze. So we can kind of go back to the dehaze and kind of increase that a bit and kind of make this pop a little bit. You can see more of the exhaust. It's starting to become a hot day with that exhaust, right? That's pretty much it. After that, you could change, sharpening again. You could increase it, increase the masking. You can do denoise if there's too much grain in here with this aircraft and this heat haze. The denoise itself will kind of balance out that grain and remove it, make it a little bit smoother. It does take 5 to 6 minutes per image for that thing to process. So I try not to do it that much. You can enable your profile corrections, and this changes the profile of the lens that you're shooting. Because you got to remember that RAW is straight out of the camera. There's not really any corrections on it. Everything will have to be edited. I guess that's the draw of just taking JPEGs. Everything is pretty much set with the profile that's in camera. If you're shooting JPEG, your profile is going to show you like a pre-edit. And then you can maybe tweak it a little bit more in Lightroom or Photoshop. But the more you tweak it as a JPEG, the more artifacts you'll find, the more graininess. It's harder to edit a JPEG than it is a RAW file. All right, let's see. You think this photo is good? I think it could have a little bit more work to it. But if we did this backspace button on the Mac, we see what we started off with, right? Pretty flat, overcast, hazy blue day. Here you're seeing some detail. You get that pop of the aircraft. It feels more like the desert. I think it's a win right there, Can it be tweaked more? Yes. Can it be tweaked less? Yes. You're the artist. You decide how you want these images to look, how you want these images to feel. This is just an example. There's so many ways of editing these images that you capture. All right, so that's pretty much it. I'm going to just leave it at 2 tonight, And if you got any questions, you could always reach out to me on Instagram at Oscar or at the Spotters Podcast. You could also leave a comment on Spotify or on YouTube. If you find a better way, I'm more than happy to hear how you edit. We're all here to learn and enjoy the hobby. So thanks for watching, and I hope you have a good night.